I'll wait one more minute and then we can go ahead and get started. All right, well, give a good evening to our small intimate group. Thank you for coming and being ready to do some good thinking about the future of Blue Oak and the planning. This is our town hall meeting to give parents the opportunity to speak on what they would like to see happen with the LCAP. We've also sent out a survey last week, so we've received input from that. We have worked with faculty, staff, and students, as well as parents on that. And of course, we will continue with this plan over the next week or two to get it completed. It goes to the board. It will go to the board for approval. We'll have a public hearing and then an approval in June. The other thing that's coming up that I am taking note of as I have these meetings and look at notes is the additional funding we're receiving for learning recovery concerning COVID. And we do have a grant that's due June 1st. So I am also looking at the sort of things we need to be doing over the summer and over the next year to 2 years to address some of the things that have happened due to COVID. So, so as we talk about it, we can ask about that sort of information too. What would you like to see go forward? This is a fairly small group, so we should be able to go out of bounds just a little bit. Anyway, this first slide is just the explanation of what LCAP stands for. It's a local control accountability plan. It came to being back under Jerry Brown. He moved the state from giving us pots of money to giving us one big pot of money with a plan, and then saying we have to do a plan. For example, there used to be a specific fund for professional development for teachers, and you'd have X amount of dollars and you had to spend all that money on professional development for teachers. And so that is great because you're sure professional development gets done to spend those funds. On the other hand, sometimes it's too much or not enough, and you're scrambling to figure out how to spend that money. So with the local control accountability plan and the LCFF, which is the local control funding formula, we now can say, you know, if we need $20,000 for something, we can move it to that. So we have that a little more flexibility in how we spend the money, but we also have to do this lovely long-term plan for that money. So that's what we're doing, setting goals, planning action, and then leveraging the resources. This is developed by using stakeholder input. and addressing the state priorities. And what we're doing right now is establishing a new 3-year plan. The previous plan was 5 years. We've skipped a couple years because of COVID, and now they're coming back to us and asking for a 3-year plan. Next slide. Whoever's sliding tonight. Okay, so to support me in this endeavor, Rachel is monitoring the chat and helping me with the slides, and Alex is taking notes. So, so thank you to the team. But we are not here to share our opinions. We are here to hear yours. Hello. Okay. So this is a nice little graphic from the California Department of Ed that sort of gives you the sense of what the LCAP is to do. The idea is that we're looking at resources and supports for all of the needs of all of the students, and then choosing and looking at what our goals are based on that. And they have, so that's the outside rim. The next rim on the inside, you'll see conditions of learning, student outcomes, and engagement. So under conditions of learning for a school like ours, we have basic services, and that just means the school is safe. We have curriculum we have, our teachers all have credentials. That's the basic stuff. Then the state standards is Common Core. Are we utilizing the Common Core state standards and getting access to that? Course access has to do with, are all students able to access the courses? So this is primarily for 7th through 12th graders, but it's things like, are they all able to access our music and our Spanish courses and so on? That's conditions of learning. These two, expelled youth and foster youth, are for county offices of education only. The next thing I'll talk about is student outcomes, and that's pretty much what you would expect. Are the students achieving the learning that they should be learning? Are they having and looking at other outcomes, excuse me, that we might have, like our artistic achievement and things like that, student outcomes. And then these three are the first two I think are pretty clear. The first one is, are parents involved in the school? Are they part of making decisions? Excuse me again. And then student engagement. And that has to do with attendance. Excuse me. That has to do with attendance. And then if we have, oh my goodness, if we have a curriculum that's engaging, and are we engaging both students that are struggling and students that are excelling? The last one is school climate. Is it safe? Do our students treated with respect? Are students of different race, genders treated fairly and equitably in the school? So that's school climate. The surveys that we've just completed, both students and parents, were primarily on school climate, with the asking questions like, do you feel like the school listens to you? Do you feel like, for children, do you feel safe on campus? That sort of thing. And the surveys we used are focused on K-8 specifically. There are different surveys for high school students. So that's an overview of what we're looking at, what the state is asking us to look at. And when you go into the star, you see a set of words around the middle: healthy, safe, engaged, supported, and challenged. And these really fit in with what we do at Waldorf, because they're really talking about, they express what the state sees as making sure we we serve the whole child. So, so as we talk tonight, we will talk specifically, we'll ask mostly about how we're doing on those 5 items. Any questions about the outline of what the LCAP is looking at? I know this is a lot of language, you know, from the state as to what we're doing, but it's really what they try to do to make sure they're covering all the aspects of education.
Susan, I do have a quick question.
Yeah.
So then, I mean, this is an awful lot of outcomes, or an awful lot of swim lanes, let's say. So is the point of the meeting tonight to come up with, or to suggest solutions that apply to all of these, or are we going to take a subset and work on those?
What I'm looking at tonight is to really look, I have a set of questions I'm going to ask.
Oh.
And it's really, if you look at those 5 things, it's really about how are we doing there? You know, do you feel like the campus is safe, for example? You know, we have good locks on the doors. That's very concrete. But then when we look at safety, we also look at much more closely at the climate. Do students feel safe emotionally on campus as well? Do we have good supports for students who are struggling mentally, for, you know, with mental health? Are students excited and interested in the curriculum? That would be student engagement. So, and that's of course covered under engage. So that's why, yeah, it's a lot of big information, and I think it took me 3 years to figure this out. But that's why I want to focus on those 5 words that are really the center of what whole child learning is, and how are we doing under those particular areas.
Okay, and just so I understand, so like the example you gave there, you chose safe, but then you talked about school climate. They're related, even though safe is not pointing at school climate, and they're not color coded the same.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Any other questions? Okay, want to give you the next slide, Rachel? Okay, so just a general information slide. Who are the stakeholders? Because that's who we talk to about what our LCAP should look like and what we should focus on: students, parents, faculty, staff, and community members. So very general, broad group. And then here are the different ways that we get input: surveys, the town hall meeting, which is this evening, staff meetings. We have what we received from, it's called MTSS, a fidelity integrity assessment. And what that assessment is basically looking what best practices are in schools and measuring Blue Oak against that. So that's something that staff does. Strategic plan, which we'll be doing with the board in May, and then how that relates to our actual charter document. Next slide. Okay, I don't know that I can do this. So I was going to share for you our dashboard at CDE, which talks about what we, where we looked in 2019. We have our 2 areas of struggle on the dashboard are attendance and suspensions. Those are our hardest areas that we want to look at. We also are working on our test scores, of course, and our academic test scores. We're doing okay with those. It also has a variety of, if you're able to look at that, are we going to be able to look at this? Okay, maybe we are.
Where is the information that you wanted, Susan?
It's under search for dashboard,
Okay,
Blue Oak dashboard.
let's see. California School
That's it.
Dashboard.
Mhm. Then Blue Oak, Chico, and then change to 2019. Yeah. There we are.
Nice.
So this is our official Chico, California State dashboard that does our, that talks about where our school is. So as you can see, as I said before, we are in red for chronic absenteeism and suspensions rates. So red is bad, blue is good. For our ELA and our mathematics, we are in yellow, which means we're improving and at our school over the past couple of years. The additional ones here, we meet the standards. So our teachers are credentialed, our instructional materials are approved, our facility is safe, and so on. So I think there is another page down, is there? Not sure. Yeah, okay, that's our population. Keep going one more page down. So this explains, as we go into it, where we are as far as our performance. And we have, because we're a small school, there'll be things like English learner progress that won't show up because there's so few of them. So there's much of that. But this is where you would go if you wanted to learn more about the specific groups of students and how they're doing. All right.
Susan, is this data this data must be colored by the fact that COVID was active in 2019? Or is this for the prior year?
Yes, this is for 2019. So the testing that ended in 2019, 2020, 1920 is not on here. And of course, 2021 is not on here yet because it is, yeah, because we haven't finished the year yet. So this was our 18-19 data. And
okay.
So 2020 was decided they weren't going to do any data for 2020. And so 2021, we will have data at the end of the year, but that data will be colored by COVID because it will be the tests based on what we have done over the past year. And of course, there's a lot that hasn't happened that usually does.
Okay, so we can reasonably assume that this is representative of a typical year.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Great.
Okay. I would give one caveat to that though, Ryan. We did find after the campfire that suspension rates went up because we had, of course, a lot more trauma in the community, the school community. So
I don't mean to be like cutting off the presentational part of this. Is this where we talk about it, or?
It's fine to ask questions. I'm glad you're asking questions. That's fine. There's a lot of information here. If you tried to wait until I was done, you would probably not be able to, we'd just have to be going back and forth the slides. So this is fine, Ryan. I'm glad you're asking the questions. That's not what the discussion is. So this is the background information. So
oh, okay. This is not
discussion. Yeah,
okay.
Fine. Okay. Okay. Any more questions about the dashboard? We will then move on. Okay. So I've been asked a couple of questions around what we're planning now. I have 2 board members here and this isn't board approved yet, but this is the direction we're going with school plans for 21-22. The intent is to fully open next year. So back to our regular on-site classes and schedules. We have a few requests for continued distance learning options. So we're looking at that need as it progresses and how we're going to meet that need of those families. We are planning for learning loss recovery. We're looking at some summer school options between July 12th and August 10th, probably a couple of 2-week sessions, but we'll focus only on students that are invited. Those are students that really need that focus so we can give them the time and attention. Also, Emma Todd, our counselor, is planning to work through the summer with students that are in need of support to make sure that they don't lose their progress over the summer. Next slide. All right, now's the discussion time. So if you looked at that lovely graphic, there were those 5 areas. And so my question is basically, does Blue Oak provide students with a supportive, challenging, engaging, healthy, and safe environment? And then the subsets of those are what do you see us as doing well? And the importance to that is that as we do the plan, we need to be careful that we don't say, focus so much on what we can improve, and there's definitely things we can improve, that we end up sort of throwing the baby out with the bathwater and the things that we forget to fund and support the things that we're already doing well. So we want that balance in the responses and in the plan tonight. So what do we do that supports this goal of having this sort of environment? I won't go through the words again. And where can we do more? And in the question, to consider the physical, emotional, and academic health of students, consider how we address at Blue Oak. This is kind of special to Butte County and to us, but the effects of the campfire, of COVID, and then racial justice and inequity and equity. And one of the things, if you go to CD and look through the plans and what they're looking for, every single one of the categories of the 8 priorities talks about equity. So that, to me, the through line in any of the discussions we have is to make sure we're looking at equity. Are we serving our foster youth well? Are we serving our homeless youth well? Are we serving our special education students well? Are we serving our LGBTQ students? Are we serving our racially diverse students well? How are we looking at that? What do we need to be thinking about to make sure we're doing that? So with that, I will put the question out to you first. What do we do well to support the goals of a supportive, challenging, engaging, healthy, and safe environment? And I'm looking for you to talk now.
Alicia, would you like, oh, she's got her hand.
Is that okay?
Yeah, go ahead,
I
Alicia.
raised my hand. Okay. I want to just talk about safety. That's one of the big reasons that we chose Blue Oak, was for the safe environment. And so I feel like Blue Oak is doing that really, really well. We love that the school is one contained unit. It's one building where there are clear entrances and exits that are locked during school hours, and that you have staff that are both inside and outside, like ground staff and staff, walking the hallways to make sure things and people are safe. So we feel really good as parents that we are dropping our child off in a safe environment. Talking about physical safety, that was a big one for us. Emotionally, I would also say safe environment, because we've had great interactions with our teachers when they've noticed that our child had some anxiety about being dropped off, the first few days of kindergarten or maybe first few weeks. And they were so sweet and supportive of his emotional health and our emotional health. And we were so grateful for that. And that has continued on into first grade. And then academically, we also feel super safe environment for our child to learn and grow and ask questions and be exposed to, material that we wouldn't know to bring to him because we're not first grade teachers or kindergarten teachers. So we're really happy with the safe environment for our child's physical, emotional, and academic health at Blue Oak. Thank you.
Thanks, Alicia.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I think a really kind of cool, concrete example of that physical safe environment, when we first started going, the kindergarten gate was just kind of close it as you come in kind of thing, which wasn't all that safe. And it was obvious that at some point y'all realized it and addressed it. And it felt like as soon as you realized it, you really kind of jumped on it in a meaningful way. So that was like a really kind of real world example of being okay with not getting it right the first time and then doing better, so I was really appreciative of that. And that didn't, and of course I set off the gate alarm a lot, so oops. Let's see. Yeah, another thing that we really enjoyed, and that another reason we chose Blue Oak, there's so many reasons we chose Blue Oak, but one of them was all of the what we considered very healthy outdoor times. So so physically healthy, we felt like the students were really going to be more physically healthy at a school like this versus another. That is something that we've seen drop off a bit right now, and I think that's probably just like COVID logistics. But so yeah, so I don't have a clear picture of what it would look like in a regular first grade class. But that was a pretty high priority for us when we were considering which school to attend.
Thank you.
Yeah, totally.
Anyone else want to share what they see us as doing well to support this goal?
Would it help
Hi,
if oh, sorry.
No, that's
I was
okay.
just
Go
gonna
ahead.
ask real quick, Trisha, if it would help if I went back to if I put the questions in the chat and then I went back to this for kind of
Yes.
brainstorming purposes.
Yes.
Good idea, Alex. Thank you.
So, oh, I'm sorry. I think Trisha, you wanted to speak.
Yeah, well, I was just gonna say, I think that we kind of look at the whole child approach, what I think is super helpful. So we're not focused on maybe one specific thing and trying to improve that. So I think Blue Oak does that really well as a community and the administration and the teachers. So we're always looking at different aspects as far as outdoor time or academic approach or the handwork or the Spanish. So I think as a collective group, Blue Oak does that really well. So I mean that's probably the strongest thing that brought me to Blue Oak is the diversity that it offers. So
I can't figure out how to raise my hand, but I'm thinking about that dashboard that you shared, and specifically around suspensions. And I can't help but wonder if that is kind of a little bit of a smoke signal for potentially some equity issues around suspensions. I know that's something that we want to improve in general, and it seems that maybe we could do some poking around in that arena to see what student populations are receiving suspensions. Is that equally distributed? And suspension as a concept, is that even an appropriate concept for a school like Blue Oak? Especially in the context of what should we spend money on? May it be more appropriate to spend money on some mental health services on campus to keep students on campus and to teach them how to, be more emotionally healthy and really kind of avoid the whole topic of suspension in general. We have not personally experienced that, but that doesn't seem like a completely illogical place to start poking around in.
Thank you, Ryan.
Susan, speaking of suspensions, what number of students are we actually talking about?
Oh, goodness. I don't have that number easily available, Vicky, but I would not, I would say that it's a significant issue for the school, the number of suspensions that we have and the number of students that are involved. We do have, of course, a core percentage that are suspended more often than others. And then a few that get a suspension once a year or once in their lifetime. But I can get you that number, but I don't have it easily available tonight.
All right, that's fine. Thank you.
Yeah.
Just looking at the dashboard here again, it actually does kind of break it down, and I have no idea how reliable this data is, but even the dashboard thinks it's our socioeconomically disadvantaged students and students with disabilities and Hispanic students.
Yeah.
Like even the dashboard says.
Yeah, I do recall, and thank you, Ryan, for looking at that, because that is part of the public information. I do recall we had a significant issue in 2019 with special education students unusually high. And we've done quite a bit of work to address that, and that number has gone down. Of course, in 2021, we haven't done any suspensions because the kids haven't been in school very much. So it's when the days are shorter and it's only 4 days a week and it's only part of the year, it has not been an issue this year. So we're looking for how we can set up 21, 22 with the right kind of interventions to keep our numbers low and to increase our attendance overall. Those two issues feed into the other issues. When students aren't on campus, they're not learning. And those are two reasons why students aren't on campus. So what do we do to get them back on campus?
Alex, I see that your hand is up.
Yeah, I have a couple people here in the chat that I just wanted to, I have a question.
Okay.
Is there a way to see, someone asked, is there a way to see some statistics of how parents answered the parent survey?
Sure, we can share that. It just came in today, so we haven't really reviewed the information too well. But Alex, can you share the surveys that we received, the graphs? Do you have those?
I'm sure I can pull it up.
All right, thank you.
Just give me 1 minute here.
Mm-hmm.
Gotta dig through some stuff.
Susan, do you have any other kind of background or institutional knowledge around the absenteeism as well? Have you done any digging there? Any trends?
So yes, we have a really significantly high chronic absenteeism, meaning those are students that are in school less than 90% of the time. Good attendance, and I just did these letters. Good attendance is 98% or above. That would be considered excellent attendance. 96 and above is 96 is about average. So 90% is a low number, and it has to do with low socioeconomic. And chronic absenteeism is one of those numbers, as we talk about equity, that a district, for example, might say, hey, we have high attendance, but when you break it down to income base or racially, you'll see that, yep, white kids attend, other kids don't. It's that. So it's definitely an equity issue. The other piece of that for us is we've had some pretty significant illness periods. And so when people get sick, like the February before we closed, we had a significant drop in attendance because kids are sick. We do not have what districts have, the Saturday makeup, where if you don't come to school, then you can show up on Saturday for that. We don't have that. So what we have, so we do some independent study work, but it has to be done while the student is at home. So that's difficult. If a child is really sick, you can't really do homeschool. So yeah, the chronic absenteeism is definitely primarily a low income issue. Sometimes it's also an upper class issue when families feel like they don't really need so much school. They'd rather go to on a vacation and feel that that's a better use of their time with their families. So sometimes we have that too. So we are drilling down this year into chronic absenteeism and really starting, I think I have a number of meetings over the last 2 weeks just to talk to the families who are struggling with that, to try to collect that data for Blue Oak specifically and see what we can do about helping the individual families to really see what the issues are around why they're not attending. So yeah, mental health issues come into it. Lots of things come into it right now as far as attendance. Okay, can we roll down a little bit, Alex, on this?
Sorry, what did you say, Susan?
That I asked you to do what you just did, so you're reading my mind. So the first couple of questions were really about why students are here, why parents brought them, and it are based on some of the general beliefs what are said. So the love of Waldorf, the charter school, arts and music, social emotional support are some of the reasons. And then rolling down, and this will be information that will be included in along with yours, some of the things we do well. People love our arts integration. They love our welcoming atmosphere. Roll down a little more, slightly more thought our academics needed some work. Our preparation for high school would be the next one. So those are some of the areas that we are weaker on. So you can see the agreement, disagreement. This is a climate survey. It is something developed out of the Bay Area, one of the universities there. I'm not going to keep reading, so I'll just let you guys look at it.
What's the procedure for getting on the stack?
For what? I'm not sure I understand.
For speaking.
Oh, raise your hand.
Okay.
Steve, you have a question?
No, I had a comment. I hadn't spoken yet. I really appreciate the whole child approach. I feel that Sophia is very supported. PD's in kindergarten, and Miss Susan, despite the distance learning challenges, has been super supportive as well, sending daily emails. So I feel like myself as a parent is encouraged, even under difficult circumstances, to engage with the school or the teachers. So I think you guys are doing that very well. I'm not so concerned about the academics, but again, my children are younger, so I understand parents with junior high school students might feel different. Same with safety. I'm not that concerned about it, but I think the procedures that you implemented with the checkpoint at the main, the front desk there is appropriate. And overall, I think the only thing I would like to see change a little bit, and I understand it's probably a district issue and not necessarily just Blue Oak, but I I'd like to see the meals offered through the kitchen be a little bit better than what I've seen. And that's about all I have. And also piggyback on what Ryan said about suspensions. I was suspended a lot when I was in high school, 8th, 9th grade. And that was mostly just because I developed critical thinking very early. And so, being in an environment where you're kind of forced to conform and stuff is a little difficult, especially as you're developing your sense of, self-identity. Thanks.
Thank you, Steve. Okay, to the parent that wanted to look at the survey results, any comments on that?
First, I have Alicia, and then I have Ryan.
Okay.
One thing I noticed when you were asking for demographic data, there was a large portion that said they identified as other or multi-ethnic. And I feel like we really lost who they are because everything else was so clear. It was white, Hispanic, African-American. And I just wonder, who that is, because that was a lot. It was like 14% of the folks in there. So I wonder if we could have put in like a write-in, like if they're multi-ethnic, well, please tell us, how you identify, what, racial and ethnic identities you have, because then we could have a better sense of who they are and how they identify.
Yeah, that's a good thought, Alicia. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah.
One other point I had from before when we were talking about suspensions and absenteeism was I do worry about, in terms of equity, how we are keeping and making sure that our families of color and students of color feel safe at our school, both physically and emotionally. And I wonder, that goes back to my questions about what training our staff has, who are majority white, to look at their own, implicit bias and their own, socialized ideas about people of color and children of color. What have they done so that they don't show up in a way that is more harmful to students of color versus white students? So that is something that's come to mind when you were talking about how much that you have so many students that are both chronically absent and a high suspension rate, especially right after such a big event such as the campfire that affected a lot of students. And it just kind of breaks my heart to hear, that there were so many suspensions right after that, because it was such a traumatic thing for all of us. And I don't know if Ryan said this, but I would be interested in seeing Blue Oak allocate some funds for more school counselors or behavioral specialists, especially coming back after another traumatic event, a year of COVID-19 and a lot of very national and public racialized violence in our country that's been hard for all of us, regardless of race and ethnicity.
Thank you.
I don't have any hands up right now.
I do have one other question in terms of the health, like physical health of the students. Steve talked about the lunches. Since this is our first year in first grade and we've been just doing the bag lunches, I don't know if that's representative of what the food normally is. But we have just noticed that it's pretty high sugar foods that have been coming home in the lunch bag and then the snack bag. And I worry about the folks who rely on that because, and I did notice that we have a 55%, so more than half of our students are socioeconomically disadvantaged and probably taking advantage of the free snack and free lunch at school and maybe even free breakfast. But I worry that we are exposing them to more harm by only providing them with pretty not healthy options if they're, you know, high carb, high sugar, high fat options. So I do worry about that healthy aspect, their physical health, and how that might be showing up in how they show up at school. If they eat something, you know, really high in sugar, and then they have a lot of energy, but then they get in trouble for that. But it's really based on what they ate because they didn't have any food at home. So they ate what was at school.
Good point. Thank you, Alicia.
Steve?
Yeah. Again, about the food, you know, and thinking about the suspensions and trying to think about these intersections and how like problems can become solutions. Like, I know that, you know, the gardens at Blue Oak are really good, but my understanding, you know, from the folks I've talked to is that like it's a volunteer effort. And I'm wondering how much support the school currently provides to that, and how we might provide more support to that, even as so far as like, you know, a stipend to some kind of manager to plan and administer that. Because that's a great way to, both if you have these students that have problems with being high energy, like say after lunch or before lunch, then, you know, there's maybe a way to funnel them out to do some yard work and get some sun time, et cetera, you know, seasonally appropriate. And then also then integrate that with the lunches so that there's fresh produce. And then also, I think it's really important to teach our children. That's what I'm teaching my children in my own backyard. And I'd love to see it at the school for, you know, students who live in apartment complexes and don't really have access to dirt. But connecting us to a regional food culture is really important, I think, as far as developing the skills to exist in our landscape in a sustainable way. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ryan?
Hey, I figured out how to raise my hand. This is feeling a little tangential at this point, but I really like what Steve just said. I think it's also an opportunity to have some parent engagement there. I know that I would absolutely participate in a gardening thing. And that's also something that Alicia and I have just kind of offhandedly quipped more than once driving through the parking lot, where, you know, there's kind of actually a lot of growing space there if only planter boxes were placed down. So I think that that's a cool intersection of how the school and the community might solve a couple different problems with one kind of clever action. I like that a lot, Steve.
Alex, you have your hand up.
I got some more questions in the chat. I lost them. Here they are. What sort of changes are we anticipating after June 15th when mandates drop? Will specialty classes also be back on campus?
That is our intent, is that we'll have a regular program starting in the fall. So we would anticipate that specialty classes will also be part of the integrated on-site program. We're excited for that. We've missed them.
Alex, you still have your hand up. Did you have another question?
No, sorry. I'll put it down.
Alicia?
You're muted.
You're muted.
Sorry. I was going to speak to the little area that talks about parent involvement. Is that okay? Or are you going to be asking a different question that talks about that?
No, go right ahead.
I was just going to say that I feel supported as a parent at Blue Oak in terms of parent involvement and responsiveness to questions that we've had or issues that we've brought up. If anything, I would love more parent education, because I had never even heard of Waldorf until I came to Chico and had a child and started looking at schools, and fell in love with, the tour, and now am looking for ways to support what my child is learning at school. And I would love some parent education, more parent education on like what's happening in the classroom, so that I can support that at school, at home, and not be working against it. So that's just one area, where I would love more parent involvement.
Okay.
Amanda.
Yeah, I was going to talk about parent involvement as well. I do think that even before the campfire happened and COVID-19 hit, we were seeing a significant decrease in parent involvement. So I would love to see a position for a volunteer coordinator be part of the school. I think that if the school had someone volunteer coordinating as a large part of their job, that the amount of money that person would be paid would come back in dividends to the school. And then, of course, I also have plenty of lovely things to say about how my children are supported, how I do think that it's a healthy and safe environment. I do agree with the unfortunate quality of the food. And I think that the teachers and the school as a whole does a wonderful job of keeping children engaged. So I'm very happy with that. And I would say that I'm fairly happy with the level of challenge that my kids experience. Even my most academically inclined child is challenged in the less academically focused areas, like music and handwork, et cetera. And that's been very beneficial. Thank you.
Thank you, Amanda.
I have Ryan, then Alex, then Alicia.
Jumping on that parent involvement topic, I think it would be interesting if there are more opportunities like this, to be honest. Like this meeting feels like right at a healthy spot of like feeling actually involved in the school, having direct input. And I don't know if it's a large culture shift or not, but if this type of parent interaction could become more commonplace, where maybe it's not even the school seeking input as much as just like, this is the topic and we're open to discussing it with parents. And I think you've done stuff like this before, but formalizing it, making it more regular, and just seeing the staff show up with an open mind and the parents show up with an open mind is a really kind of cool, and feels like it could be very uniquely Blue Oak. And so maybe formalizing meetings like this to happen more regularly might be a suggestion to foster that.
Alex?
I had another question in the chat, but I also wanted to say to Ryan that I am helping with the Blue Oak Equity team, and we are also working to make something like that happen soon, kind of a forum. We are trying to find a fun name for something like a happy hour type of discussion. So hopefully that will be coming soon. We're really excited about what we're working on.
That's cool. Yeah,
then,
it would be fun to have direct access to y'all.
Yeah. And then the question I had here in the chat says, how can the parents connect to help each other and the school more? They said, I thought we would be able to connect through Parent Square, but I don't think it's available.
What kind of, what are you looking for, I guess? Give me more detail. What are you looking for?
I'm gonna give a moment just in case the person's typing to Alex.
Yeah, that's fine.
And then Ryan and Alicia, both of you still have hands up. Did you want to make another comment? Okay, go for it, Alicia.
I will just speak to the parent square thing. I've been trying to get in contact with another parent because my kiddo wanted to play with that kid or their child, and I didn't have their contact info, but I realized that I couldn't do that in Parent Square. So that's something I've been trying to do in terms of parent-to-parent contact, is just email another parent that my child wants to connect with outside of school. But what I was going to say is, I was thinking about your first question here, and then with an equity lens. And one thing I do wonder is how all of these things are being measured in terms of equity and anti-racism, because I know of the task force, how that work towards equity and anti-racism is being measured with fidelity. And if we could set up a way moving forward to do that, and in support of that, I would support the hiring of a diversity officer. The new acronym is IDEA. It's inclusion, diversity, equity, and anti-racism. And I would, like I said, support hiring of that person or a team or a coordinator to make sure that we are using the equity of, or the lens of equity, looking at academic, social and emotional, and physical safety, and learning and engagement, and all of this, and the environment. The other thing I wanted to talk about was another idea, thinking about, you had mentioned that there was a high number of suspensions, and we did see that one of the populations that were affected were Hispanic students. And I thought about, well, what about hiring more counselors of color? Because maybe what's happening is that we have students who don't feel like they can talk to somebody who doesn't identify the same way that they do or look the same way as they do. And maybe they just lack a person to confide in. And instead it's coming out as, like an acting out, and then they're facing consequences for that. So I wonder if just diversifying who's in leadership, and their identities, and then giving the students, all students, a diverse range of people to go to in terms of identities, racial and ethnic and gender and sexuality, knowing that there is a safe person for them at the school that they can go to with an issue, instead of acting out and ending up with a suspension. I would support that at Blue Oak, hiring more staff of color, and then specifically counselors of color.
Alex?
Yes. The parent responded and said, looking to connect with the parents of other students in my child's class, only able to chat with my children's teachers, but not other parents. Yes.
Okay. All right. I think, and Alicia expressed that as well. So thank you. We'll start thinking about how we can do it. We can't share contact information of parents to other parents, but if there's a way we can do something else, we'll try and figure that out.
Amanda? Amanda, did you have anything that you wanted to share?
She said there's too much noise to talk right now.
Okay. Brian?
Is it true that essentially the only data, the public data, is this dashboard here? Are there other sources of data or measurement that parents could be exposed to?
Yes, as long as we have, of course, a whole plethora of data here at school as long as the subgroups are large enough that we don't, I think they need to be more than 11. So, yeah, but we do have other questions and other ways to sort data. Those are just the required ones at the state level.
Got it. Yeah, I think that kind of on the question of like, setting goals is absolutely great, but then determining how you're going to know when you succeeded at your goal or not is pretty important as well. And I've always thought that it would be really interesting to have a little bit more, I mean, especially if you have data, if you're collecting data, to be able to push that out publicly, or at least maybe even just Parent Square, to let at least the community kind of see the changes, see the issues that you're aware of, see the issues you're working on, see the issues that you're improving on. I think there's a really interesting story to be told in the numbers about the school's priorities and where they put their resources to address what issues. So yeah, if you have more measurement and that measurement is more regular than once a year, that might be really interesting to put out there for us.
Okay.
Alex, you have your hand's down. Never mind. Alicia.
I was thinking about what Stephen said. We have similar aged children, and so we aren't so much worried about the academics right now. It's more of the, social and emotional and physical for us right now. But I also want to say that I really support more allocated funding to social and emotional learning. And just social and emotional engagement, knowing that we're coming off of a very emotional year for a lot of students. And as Ryan was saying, I'd be interested in tracking that and seeing that, if we put more effort or funds or people or whatever into the social and emotional learning and engagement, if then the academics pick up, if then the absenteeism picks up, the suspensions decrease. Because maybe it is that there's a feeling with the student population that they don't feel safe emotionally or physically or even academically, and that we need to lean a little bit harder on social and emotional learning and engagement. And I would support that.
Alex.
I have another question in the chat. Has there been any school planning on how to support social emotional development for our children as we move through the trauma of these lockdowns?
Yes, actually, that's part of our LCAP plan and part of our learning opportunity plan. Emma Todd, who is our counselor, has developed about a 3-pronged system for beginning to look at the social emotional development. We also have work on how to gauge the needs of children, how to measure what's going on and ask the right kind of questions so that we're sure those kids that just quietly sit don't get missed. So sometimes the ones who are acting out are the ones that get our attention, and the ones sometimes who need us the most are the ones who are very good and do all the right things and are internally needing help. So trying to look at all of those things and how we can make sure we do that. So that will be part of the plan coming out. The question that others are bringing up is, do we have enough staff to really engage it? So we'll be continuing to look at that.
I have another follow-up question about that, Susan.
Mm-hmm.
Are these programs sustainably funded indefinitely or short-term?
Both. So the intent is that they'd be sustainably funded. So they're part of our regular counseling practice and behavior practice. So it could be implemented by the staff that we have. The concern, of course, is as we look at the next year to 2 years and are dealing with the trauma work that we need to do, will we need additional staffing support in the short term? So the answer is yes to both.
If no one else has questions, I have more in the chat. Have we received any funds related to COVID? And if so, how are those funds planning to be used?
Part of the, so yes, we've received funds already and spent that money over the past year. It was primarily on things like making sure we had masks, HVAC cleaning, and new filters, and a lot of work on technology to get to the place where students could learn at home. So purchasing devices, purchasing programs, hotspots for students who don't have wireless at home, all of those sorts of things were the main focus of the money that we have spent so far. Now we're looking at the funding that's coming in and that we're applying for over the next 2 years. And these are part of what we're talking about now, and I'm taking information from that. But the staff has come up with some ideas that they want to work on: a summer school, the social emotional learning we talked about, potentially increasing our after school, making sure that our kindergarten students can stay for the full day. So those are all possibly more movement practices to help with integration. So those are just some of the things that are on the list as possibilities right now.
I have another question in the chat.
Mhm.
In terms of equity, how are the voices of BIPOC encouraged and honored?
So at this point, the main thing we're doing, of course, is surveys. So we're looking at making sure we have representation within the survey work. The other piece that we're doing within staff and students is working on a more diversified, or a less centralized decision-making process, so that groups of either students, families, parents can be more engaged in the decision-making process. And one thing in particular for parents is to really to look at a parent representation for looking at things like writing the LCAP and reviewing it, that would be more specifically representative of the diversity in the school.
Alicia? You're
Sorry. And as a follow-up question to that one, in terms of curriculum and policy, how is Blue Oak, and then also, in terms of equity, how is Blue Oak deconstructing systemic racism and bias in the curriculum and at the policy level?
Well, we're in the process now of looking at the materials that we use primarily. So a lot of our work in education is done through novel sets, reading, and so making sure that we have a variety of materials that reflect the populations that we need to reflect throughout the school. We also have are looking at things like our field trips, for example. Are we sure that we are doing the kind of field trips that also bring in the variety that we should be. Field trips, and the other thing that came up recently, oh, I don't remember anyway, festivals. So one of the things that in attending some of the work that's being done from the Waldorf community, how the festival life traditionally, or when Steiner first started Waldorf, they would have even weekly sorts of festivals that were really engaging the curriculum that the students were using. And so one of the things we talked about is if you're going to do something about a Chinese moon festival, it should be something that the students have learned about in the classroom, and then we have that festival for the community as a whole. So it's those sorts of discussions that are going on, and how we can make those balances and really bring the diversity into the classroom and then into the life of the community as a whole. So those are just some of the things that are going on right now.
That's great. Thank you. And that, I think that was mostly curriculum level, and just the other part of my question was at the policy level, what's happening there?
Well, the policy level for me starts with the education in the classroom, and then based on what we work that will work in the classroom, we will build a policy that will support what's going on in the classroom.
Oh, sorry, I meant policy in terms of like suspension policy or absentee, absent policy, dress code policy, that type of thing. Want to make sure that it's not affecting different students because, differently, that we're all facing the same consequences. We're not, being given a level 3 suspension because we're Black, or, that type of thing. Like, we're being treated equally via the policies.
Yeah, that's a more, that's one of those things. You have a policy that says this is what happens, and this work, Alicia. So this is what happens when you do that. You punch somebody out in the parking lot. This is what's going to happen. And then when you look at it, you find out, gosh, it's more often brown and Black kids that are getting in trouble for that. What's going on? So I think what we're looking at from a policy basis is to make sure we're including that in our thought process in going into the behavior realm, and making sure that we are doing more of the positive things ahead of time, and simply taking that into consideration as we move forward. And I think that's where we are right now, and it is certainly a developing question. As I attend, like Black Minds Matter, for example, did a really good conference on this particular issue, but they really weren't ready to give me any solutions. They didn't have, so this is what you do. They were just saying, we are examining the data and what's going on and trying to figure this out. So being conscientious and being conscious of what's going on, I think, is the main thing that we can do right now for that.
We have Ryan and then Trisha.
Just responding to that topic, that's a good topic for sure. I didn't hear you mention in there, Susan, any sort of formalized or updated training for faculty. Is that part of the plan, or is it not part of the plan?
Yeah, we've been attending all year trainings that have been available through a variety of organizations, Waldorf and the state and other organizations around racism and equity. And as I said, it's a big through line for the whole LCAP process. So there's a lot going on there. And we are looking, reading Kendi's book as a faculty and staff, going through some of that. That's kind of been the main priority for the staff at this point that we're all going through together. But as we look at our summer trainings for Waldorf, we're looking at how equity is included. And racism, and how are we really looking at our curriculum and our presentation in that way. So yeah, it's big. There's a
Yeah.
lot going on. So and I'm not at this point, other than like Book and Kendi, what I'm really doing is allowing teachers to join groups. For example, in the lower grades, they have a group called We Can, which is a Waldorf low kindergarten group that are throughout the United States, and they're focusing on equity and how it affects the stories and work in kindergarten. So those teachers are going to that one. So rather than me say we're all going to do this, it's what's available and what does this team need to learn or that will need to learn. So doing a lot of different things at this point as we get into this, and hearing some really amazing work and focus going on throughout the faculty, and within our training for our parapros as well. So
Cool.
Yeah.
Is in the context of the topic of tonight too, is it your perception that there, what am I trying to ask? Is there a barrier for faculty around time and money? Like, and can we allocate resources to create time or create space for that type of development? Are you hearing that kind of feedback?
It is an issue, and we're trying to look at how to develop a professional development plan that will support this additional work that we're doing.
Cool. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'll write that down that you're suggesting that, Alex. Hey, Ryan, we need to have some more time for professional development.
Okay, I'm suggesting that.
Okay, thank you.
Trisha?
Yeah, so I wanted to go back to the field trips because that brought up something. So right now I'm doing a course that's on happiness, and it talks a lot about experiences have more to do with our happiness as a person than things, right? Than cars or houses or toys, right? Because those fade away very quickly, and then you want the newest and the best thing, whereas your experiences are something that you can reflect back on. And then when you share those stories with other people, it brings happiness to them and reminds you of the happiness you had when you had those experiences. So in talking about equity and experiences, I think that would go a long way as far as bringing those children that happiness to where they wouldn't maybe normally have that, like going to Table Mountain, like that was beautiful. We went 3 or 4 weeks ago, or just those things. And I think part of the challenge that I've seen, and my kids are younger still, but we haven't done a lot. And obviously this last year has been, not any of it, but is some of it's been the parent involvement for transportation. And so maybe allocating funds for transportation to be able to do those things and have those experiences with those kids, I think would be a really good thing to think about. I know we do amazing field trips and big field trips in the upper grades, which is, I was super excited on my tour when I did Blue Oak, but I think bringing some of that to the lower grades, obviously not overnight stuff, but more day stuff, I could just like going to Table Mountain, I'm like, we could be sitting here in a circle with the flowers and we could be telling stories and singing songs. And we did that, but there were only 4 or 5 of us as a family. So so I think more experiences like that would go really far.
Thank you.
Alex?
I have another question in the chat. I've noticed that Blue Oak meetings are predominantly white spaces. What is your plan to better include families of color?
The plan is to really work to reach out specifically to those families and talk to them about their desire for engagement and make sure that they feel comfortable in sharing them. And should we be, and my question would be to them, to those families, should we be having meetings within cultural groups, or should we have is there a different way that we can reach out and help the diverse families to engage with us? I think you're right in that the good old middle and upper income white families that are used to the different, to engaging comfortably and even this kind of conversation. And thank goodness for them. But when we are all making these decisions, we need to make sure we're reflecting everyone. So that is definitely a part of what we want to do with the LCAP process and putting that equity idea into the LCAP. And sorry for my use of these and those and the so forth, because sometimes I don't know how to express it.
Trisha, did you have anything else? Your hand is still up, that's why I asked.
No, sorry, I'll put it down. Thanks.
I do have one more question to approach if we feel like we have completed that slide. So one of the areas that we talk about with pupil or student outcomes is other outcomes. And it's a pretty broad statement that we can write our own. And I asked this for really two pieces, not just for our LCAP, but also as we begin next year to review our charter for approval. We will be by the end of, or in the beginning of the fall of 2022, we will want to return to the board for another approval. And one of the things we talk about is what kinds of outcomes that are not so much test scores and so forth that we should really put down as our strengths or things that we consider important. And wanted to ask that question of this group to see if there's a way I can work that into the LCAP as we move forward with our charter renewal.
Do you mind showing us the wheel again so we know what it is and isn't there?
So you can see under student outcomes, there's student achievement, which is closely related to test scores, English, math, science. And then there's other student outcomes. So that's what I'm looking at. What kind of students are we looking for and how? And again, Ryan, back to your question, we have to figure out how to measure it. That's always the challenge. But what kind of student outcomes are you as parents, when you think of a student leaving Blue Oak in 8th grade, what kind of qualities or ideas or outcomes would you want them to have at that point? What are you looking for?
Ryan?
I think one that comes to mind, top of mind, would be something around civic engagement, kind of like taking seriously and playing your part, playing your role. You're playing your part, in your local and larger society that you lived in.
Trisha. Oh, I'm sorry, Alicia.
It's okay. Trisha has her hand up. She can go first.
You're muted, Trisha.
Thanks, Ryan. For me, it's critical thinking. So I would piggyback on what Ryan said, but being a critical thinker in our society, I think that's something that's really lacking. So that is something that I try to teach my kids, because I think that goes far in trying to accomplish almost anything if you have that skill set. So.
Alicia?
Yes, I would agree with critical thinking, civic engagement, but another, prong on this wheel, I think, could be student wellness. And that could include, self-awareness, agency, recognizing their place in the world, its location, its their identities, their awareness of, who they are as human beings and what they represent. And then also, I don't know where this would fall under there, but, some sort of training and awareness in their own, anti-racism education and anti-bias education, and understanding the difference between equity and equality, that there is a difference there. And not only, I feel like I see this a lot when I get the students at the college level, it's, well, how are we the same, right? But no, it's actually supporting and celebrating how we're different, and not making students afraid of each other's differences, but better understanding our differences, and different perspectives, which goes along with critical thinking. And specifically where I teach history, a better knowledge of where they come from and who they are. So not just teaching white American Eurocentric history, but teaching multicultural American history and even some world history, I feel like would go a long way in producing really great little kids, or sorry, junior high and high school students. Thank you.
And adults.
And adults, yes, exactly.
The goal is that they're thoughtful adults.
Yes, thank you.
Uh-huh.
Trisha?
I do have something else. This is Trisha. I don't know if anybody else has a hand raised.
Nope, you got it.
Okay. So the other thing I would add is acceptance. So kind of like what Alicia is saying, but being able to be accepting of other people, and just where they're at and what they're trying to do. So I guess like kind of like non-judgmental.
Alicia?
Thank you, Trisha. You sparked another thing for me. Engaged, right? And curious. And I think that I have heard and worked with some Blue Oak students at the college level, and I've seen this already. But also like good communicators. I think that goes to what Trisha is saying too, like able to listen to a different perspective and then also communicate well. I say well in terms of, not shut down, be able to listen and have a conversation, or even like a debate, even just like a friendly conversation with differing opinions, I think is a real skill that sometimes our students lack if they're not exposed to what that looks like.
Thank you.
Ryan?
Hey, I just want to say thank you for this time and thank you for this call. I have to drop off and do bedtime, but Alicia will be here, and I appreciate your time and your attention. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Vicky?
Yeah, I just want to say that I really appreciate all the everything I've heard tonight is just 100% proof of why Waldorf and this community are so wonderful. A great school because we have great people. Thank you all.
Alex, anyone else inside that chat box?
I've been taking notes on the comments that people send me. I'm making sure to include those, but I haven't received any other questions so far.
Okay, thank you. Amanda?
Yeah, something just occurred to me, and I don't know how well this would pan out logistically or whatever. Anyway, I'll just tell you what it is. I was wondering if you might seek input from former students sometime to see what they appreciated about their education and what they would like to see more of.
I love that idea, Amanda. Alicia.
I was thinking about what Trisha said about the importance of experiences. And I feel like that could be another prong here, student experience, in that they're not just learning about things, but they have had experiences out in the world, you know, using their voice or working with other people or, you know, in other communities, or sort of learning from other communities and inside other communities, but also exposure. Um, because a lot of times, again, because our curriculum is very white centered and Eurocentric, students, you know, I get them at the college level and they haven't had exposure to other voices or other ideas. And I would like to see more of that at the grade level or the K through 8 level at Blue Oak, in terms of diverse curriculum, diverse teachers, diverse identities, and all of the people they come into contact with, and then the content that they come into contact with. Thank you.
So I'll give you just a minute or so longer. If the air is dead and nobody is finding anything else they need to share with us, we'll go ahead and move on for the evening. Okay, hearing none. I want to thank each and every one of you of being here and for sharing this evening. I am agreeing so much with Vicki. I feel so blessed to work with this community and to be able to engage with this kind of real discussion and thoughtfulness about the kind of children we want to raise. And so thank you very much. You are energizing me with your thoughts. I appreciate it. So the next steps that happen is we'll review and summarize these responses and the others that we've received. We'll look based on that within the staff to set the goals and the metrics. As Ryan was saying, the goals are sometimes the easy part. The metrics is how to measure that, and that can be challenging. And then we'll present, starting, by the way, Amanda, we need this on the agenda. We'll talk to parent council, present to them and get their direct input on the goals, faculty, staff, and then finally the Blue Oak Charter Council. And then the final steps are to complete the budgets and resource assignments. And then in June, we'll have a public hearing and the LCAP will go to board approval. So those are the next steps for the LCAP. Again, feel free to reach out to me anytime you have a question, or if you think of something else in the middle of the night and you just have to share it, send me an email. I would appreciate it. Thank you all so very much.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Susan. Yeah.
Thank you.
Mhm.